Hello, let's talk about perfect square trinomials and completing the square. In a perfect square trinomial, I'm looking at this definition for right here. In a perfect square trinomial, trinomial means that we're going to have three terms, and the first and last terms are squares. For instance, we have 4x squared, and we'll say 25. The last one's always positive, so we'll put a plus 25. 4x squared and 25 are the first and last terms of a trinomial. Trinomial, three terms. But the middle term is the trick on what makes it a perfect square trinomial. The sign itself doesn't matter in the middle, so I'm going to make it a minus just because I want to. But where it comes from is the important part. That middle term, and I'm looking for what I'm going to write right here in the middle, that middle term comes from the roots of the first and last terms. Like, what do we square to get 4x squared, and what do we square to get 25? That is a 2x. Don't we square 2x to get 4x squared? And a 5 is what I square to get 25. Well, if you take 2x and 5 and multiply them, that gives us a 10x. A 10x, though, is not in the middle because we have to double it. We have to double it and make it 20x. See if I can squeeze that in there. That 4x squared minus 20x plus 25 is a perfect square trinomial. Now, if that was confusing, pause the video right now and go back to the beginning and watch and listen to that again. Now, if you understand that, this being the perfect square trinomial, the blue part, 4x squared minus 20x plus 25, we also can factor that. You had practiced factoring, the MA method, GCF, all of the factoring methods. This factors perfect square trinomials as the square of a binomial. So something squared on the outside. That binomial comes from that 2x that we squared to make 4x squared and the 5 that we squared to make 25. And this is where the sign in the middle is important. That sign in the middle goes in the middle over here. So we take 2x and we write it first. We take 5 and we write it second. And the sign in the middle goes in the middle between them. Therefore, the factoring for this is 2x, oops, I got to squeeze it, minus 5 squared on the outside. If you were to take this whole thing and FOIL it, do a double distribution, you would get 4x squared minus 20x plus 25. This is important for us when we come down here to general to vertex form. First, though, let's take these 4 examples and form perfect square trinomials, figure out this last number, and factor them into squared binomials. Let's take that first problem here. We're going to look at y squared plus 4y plus what? We have to figure that number out. We're going to have to figure this number out over here. Go back to where that came from. That came from squaring 5. Well, where did the 5 come from? Well, 5 was multiplied by 2x to give us 10x and doubled to become 20x. Let's undo all of that. Let's take that middle. What was doubled? 10x. Where did 10x come from? 2x and 5. And then 5 gives us 25. That's the process we're going to use over here. What do we square to get y squared? Well, that's easy. That's just a y. We square y. What do we square to give us this number? Well, we have to go back. What did we double to get 4y? What did we double to get 4y? Wouldn't that be 2y? 2y comes from multiplying y times what number? Well, you'd multiply a 2. 2 times y gives us 2y. 2y doubles to 4y. But 2 came from, or gives us, 4. But let's also factor this. What does it factor into? We take y, sign in the middle, and 2. And those go y, sign in the middle, and 2. Squared on the outside. Y plus 2. Okay, a little confusing. Pause the video, go back and review that again. But let's try another one. Let's move over here. Let's figure out what the constant is and then how it factors. What do we square to get x squared? What do we square to get that number? Where did 14x come from? Let's start another way. Let's start from the middle. What do we double to get 14x? Well, I'm pretty sure that's a 7x. Don't we double 7x to get 14x? Where did 7x come from? It comes from that, which was from an x, and it comes from that, which came from what number? 7, because 7 times x gives you 7x, and 7x doubles to 14x. But to finish it out, 7 gives you 49 over here. 7 squared is 49. And how does it factor? Something squared. What squared? X minus 7. X minus 7. And don't forget the squared on the outside. Okay, pause the video. I want you to try this one. Try doing that one on your own. Okay, come back. Where's p squared come from? Comes from p. P times what here? I don't know. Well, that number times p gives you 17p, because 17p is doubled to give you 34p. So that number must have been 17. And 17 squared, let me get a calculator. $17 squared is 289. So this number is 289. How does it factor? I'll pause. You write it down. It factors as p plus 17 squared. Okay, now this last one, last example here. We're going to get fractions this time. Let's start in the middle again. What do you double to get 11a? What do you double to get 11a? Well, that's 5.5a. 5.5 a's double to give you 11a. 5.5a comes from multiplying a times 5.5. And 5.5 gives us 30.25 on the end. How does it factor? You go A, sign in the middle, 5.5. A minus 5.5 squared. And that part's done. So that explains what a perfect square trinomial is and also how they factor. We need all of that information to, hold on one second, go from general to vertex form in a quadratic. General to vertex form in a quadratic. If you're not sure about how we did this top part up here, if you're not sure about this, stop the video, rewind, and watch it again. Because we need to know how to do that to change the forms of a quadratic. To change the forms of a quadratic from general, which is here, remember doing the quadratic formula to solve, into vertex form here, if you remember graphing from vertex form, we need to form perfect square trinomials, and factor it. Do you see how this quantity squared looks like this quantity squared? That's what we need to turn these polynomials into. So let's start one. It's really only a few steps, but there's a lot of math in it. We're taking, let me get the highlighter. We're going to take the x squared we're going to take x squared minus 8x and form a perfect square trinomial. But in doing that, this 20 is still part of the equation, but needs to be adjusted on the end. Let me show you what I mean. We're going to take x squared minus 8x and kind of separate it away from the 20. I'm going to take x squared and rewrite this, x squared minus 8x, and separate it to make a perfect square trinomial, but keep that 20 and have to adjust it to keep the equation the same. Notice that I have a plus a number here because perfect square trinomials always have a positive on the end. The middle sign doesn't matter. But if I'm adding something in here, I have to subtract that off to balance the equation. Add it in, subtract it off. Go back to what we did up here, what we did up here to figure these numbers out. Half of 8x is 4x. 4x comes from x times 4. 4 gives us 16. Whatever I add in has to be subtracted off. So I subtract 16. I factor this, x minus 4 squared. X minus 4 squared. And I put those two together, 20 minus 16 plus 4. And make sure you have a y equals on that. There is the vertex form. If the question asks, what's the vertex of the parabola? Opposite, same. 4, 4 is the vertex. Okay, let's try another one. I'm going to go over here. We are going to separate out 3x squared plus 18x away from the 24. This time, you see that 3? That 3 has to be factored out front. See this a right here? That's 3. It needs to be factored out away from that perfect square trinomial. So that's going to be my first step on this one. I'm going to take 3 out, which 3 times x squared is 3x squared, plus 6x, because 3 times 6x is 18x, plus the number I have to figure out. The 24 is separated over minus the adjustment number. Let's go over it again. 3 out front, because you have to separate that 3 from both of those. Then 6x times 3 gives us the 18x. Plus what? We're going to figure out 24 on the end minus the adjustment. Whatever you add in, subtract off. Add in, subtract off. Let's figure out what goes in. 6x came from 3x. 3x comes from x times 3. 3 gives us 9. 3 times 9 goes in right here. 3 times 9 goes in right here. So what is that? Well, 27. And how does it factor? 3 drops down. X plus 3 factors. Positive 24 minus 27 on the end. Y equals 3 drops down. X plus 3 is the factoring, squared of course. Collect like terms, minus 3. Here's vertex form. And if they ask where the vertex is, -3, -3. Opposite, same. Okay, let's try another one. Let's go down here. Do the same thing. Take a negative out of both, separate them off, take -2 on the end. Oops. -1 out front times what? Well, -1 times x squared is -1x squared. -2x times -1. -2x times -1 gives you positive 2x. Plus what? Minus the 2 drops down, minus what? 2x comes from 1x. 1x comes from x times 1. 1 gives us 1. 1 times -1 gives us -1. 1 times -1 gives you -1. Now drop the -1 down, factor x minus 1, collect like terms. Y equals -1 times x minus 1 squared minus 1. Vertex form. Where's the vertex? 1, -1. Pause the video, repeat anything if it's confusing, and try that one. Try that one on your own. Okay, we need to factor 2 from both of them. Separate them off and put the 6 on the end. Two times x squared plus 2x plus what? Plus 6 minus what? 2x comes from 1x. 1x comes from x times 1. 1 gives us 1. 1 times 2 makes 2. Point that out again. 2x comes from 1x. 1x comes from x times 1. 1 gives us 1. 1 times 2 gives me 2. Y equals 2 times x plus 1 squared plus 4. Vertex form. Where's the vertex if they ask you? -1, 4. Okay, so that's your notes. You're going to work on completing the square. I want you to do number 1, factor these. Number 2, figure these numbers out. Number 3, convert to vertex form. Number 4, convert to vertex form, just like you're doing these problems. Do the same thing here, but then tell me where the vertex is located. Number 5, you just have to change the order of the equation and give me A, B, and C. A, B, and C. You can skip number 6. You're only doing 1 through 5 on this worksheet. The answer key is after it, so check your work. And the work down here I have spelled out. That's your assignment for today. Go back and rewatch this if you need to. Print out the notes like you would in class if you need to, and I'll be here to help you.